emailed Gabe and tell him what I was doing, and Gabe came back and he said, wow, he said, us Americans couldn't get drunk enough to think of something like that. My grandfather came here in 1868.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why he didn't pick a better country. The Department of Agriculture has never been supportive.
Yeah.
The main support has really come through the land care movement.
Yeah.
And the people that really understand this are not people, agronomy people, but ecologists. Ecologists are the ones that really understand, and we really need more ecologists in agriculture. Yeah. I'll prove this wrong.
Yeah.
I'll prove Alan Savory wrong. Yeah, yep.
Good luck with that.
So I put
don't know Alan too well if you're trying to do that.
I do know Alan fairly well.
So we're here with the famous Colin Seis at his beautiful property Winona, which is in the midst of not a historical drought, but a drought that's part of history.
Yeah.
So how's it going here with that, Colin?
Yep. Okay. The season's certainly been tight, and we've had two years of actually of less than half our annual rainfall, 2 years in a row. Last year was probably one of the worst in this general area through central west New South Wales, that there was virtually nothing harvested at all.
Yeah,
that was last year, and then ran into this year on top of it. So yeah, it's certainly a dry time. And I took made the choice of carrying the sheep through here. We destocked about a quarter of the numbers here.
Which you're running about 3,000 or so?
Yeah, we actually threw about 3,000, or we usually are running about 4. So we destocked that, but I'd carry them through mainly because to capitalise on the very high wool prices.
Because you're still a practical farmer. That's at the end of the day.
That's right. Yeah. And it actually it's turned out to be a good decision that way, because it was fascinating because the sheep cut as much wool as they normally do. For wool growers will understand this, the tensile strength and all the wool measurements were very, very good. So it was sound, very little seed and burr in it, and consequently it sold very well. So, and that was a decision I made and planned for as much as possible. Yeah. But one of the main reasons, a couple of reasons we've been able to carry them through okay, was the native grassland here. We got a storm in February last year, and of about 40 mils, and the grasses just took off. And to a point where we harvested about a tonne of native grass seed off the place, which gave us good cash flow. And then that grass produced good, or the grassland produced good feed for summer and autumn, and then dry feed. Up until now, there's not a lot of dry feed left now, but it carried us through with some a little bit of supplementary feeding with grain and some protein and mineral supplementation.
Yeah, so it was only the protein and mineral supplement that came from outside. Everything else
That's
is
right,
from the property.
Yeah.
So when you think about drought for you, drought for you now probably means something quite different to what it did when you started on the sort of regenerative journey.
No doubt. The property is so more resilient now. It'll handle these types of seasons, and I had that in the back of my mind when I was trying to work out which direction we were going to go when it started getting drier and drier, and I knew the place would be right. It'd handle it because of the diversity of grassland species.
Well, you get little mini droughts all through. That's just part of the deal anyway. So you're getting examples throughout even reasonable times.
That's right. Yeah. And these native grasses, they just handle it so well, to a point now where we've had a little bit of spring rain, not much, but the grasses are green and ready to go as soon as, especially as soon as the weather warms up. Most people dread hot weather, but here, well, these grasses love hot weather.
Yes, and we're probably right now. It's early October, so we're probably about as bad as it'll get.
Yeah,
because you've come off a really dry winter. We've only just got rain in the last week after nothing since earlier in the year.
Yeah.
So, and your water storages, where are they at?
Yeah, pretty good. That little bit of rain, which storm we got in February, topped all of our dams up, and we've also got a bore system in place, which we're looking at expanding.
So, have you found that as a result of your work over the last, let's say 20 years, is that about right? 20 years?
Yeah.
Sort of early 90s?
Yeah.
That your runoff rates have decreased significantly, or how's that affected your the amount of water you've got in your dams? Because you're mostly dam water.
Mostly dam water. Really interesting, because a lot of people that change their grazing method, or at least increase their ground cover and litter, start to have problems with runoff. And we don't get much runoff here, but because of the soil type and because the hydrology is now functioning a lot better, a lot of the dams seem to stay full, and I think they're filling through.
They're going underground.
Underground.
Yeah, which is because people would know this is mostly granite country here, and a lot of granite country around the world will have the soil. It's usually quite a coarse profile on top, and then the water goes through, and then it hits an impermeable layer, and then might run along that horizontally and then flush out at the dam.
Yes.
Which is an advantage. Whereas some places, I mean, I remember going over to WA years ago, and they had a lot of trouble, but they didn't have that impermeable layer, so the water was just going all the way down. Yeah. So it does depend on what you've got.
Yeah.
So did you find early on, and say in the first 10 years of transition, that runoff levels were compromised until the hydrology sort of sorted itself out?
Yes, to a degree. I was talking one time to, who's retired, a fair while ago now, says are a hydrologist that had done some work in native grasslands and comparing it to introduced those types of pastures. And he said the hydrology in native grasslands was better, and the soil behaved differently in them as well.
Yeah, so infiltration went up, all of the indicators. Yeah. So what we're seing now is we've had a bit of a drive around today, and it's awfully windy out there today. We nearly lost the drone, or we did. It went in a different direction. There was a few crops that you put in earlier in the year. Can you just talk about? I think mostly oak crops. You got any other species in it all this year? Or?
We had some multi-species crops early in the piece. So
were they summer or winter?
They were winter.
Yeah.
What I'm doing here is sowing. There's about 300 acres of oats all up that we put in.
Yeah.
About 100 or more of that was early multi-species crops. Now, the multi-species crops of oats and turnip and daikon radish, forage brassica, field pea, vetch. What that gives us is very early feed and very high quality feed. Over the years, the sheep graze out those leafy plants and the oats recovers. Then we can still harvest grain from those crops. With us. But throughout the year, we generally work on about 3 lots of sowing oats, like early, mid, and late.
Yeah.
And this year I put in a very late one just as a bit of a punt on. Well, at least we were going to get green feed off it, if not grain. And the crops, they're about the same as everyone else in the district, short, and they will have some grain on them if we want to take it that far. But more important than that, we've got a backup now with our stock. If it doesn't rain, we've got 300 acres of oats that we can.
And looking at it this morning, you probably I don't know, what do you think, 1,000, 1,500 kilos per hectare around about?
It'd be something like that.
Yeah, which is, and you may, with a bit more rain, you may still be able to strip.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the best part about your system is, well, you've got that forage which, with winter rain failing, you probably only would have had half of that, if that, of the annuals that might have come through, the winter annuals.
Right. Yeah.
You don't have many winter perennials here?
Yeah, we do. Mostly microluna and wheatgrass and some wallaby grass. But what we don't have now is actually a lot of annuals.
Yeah, right.
Because the whole thing shifted to perennials.
So how does that work with the in a reasonable season, or even one like now? How do the winter perennials come along for you?
Yeah, they're fine. There's not as many here as I'd like.
Yeah.
It's certainly summer.
Do you think that gets compromised by pasture cropping a bit?
No, not if you. No, it will enhance them, providing you're really careful with herbicide.
Yeah. And what about, I suppose, with rotation of when you are cropping itself?
Yes.
Because I suppose if you were doing it too, I'm just thinking out aloud here, if you were doing the pasture cropping too frequently in a paddock, well, then you'd smother out some of the winter species potentially.
Yeah, I put a crop in and then don't come back to that for about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
usually.
right. Yeah.
Yes, if you cropped it every year, you'd start to reduce some of your grasses. But doing it the way I do it, it enhances the grasses. It improves species diversity and bulk of food.
So you'll go. So the sheep are out in and enjoying the oats and whatever else is in there now.
Yeah.
That'll all be done. And there's a lot of other people we've driven from Dubbo yesterday, and a lot of other people who are grazing their oats or stripping their oats on it. But the big difference between what they're doing and what you're doing is that they don't have anything to follow up.
That's right. There's nothing under that oats.
No.
Here, under all that oats, the warm season grasses are emerging and growing. So when the oats is grazed or harvested, we'll have green food there.
So how many other people along this road are doing what you're doing, Colin?
My cousin across the road is.
Yeah.
But he's the only one.
Yeah.
Which is really typical of almost anything that's new or different. Even talking to Gabe Brown in America, same thing there, and anyone that does anything different, the neighbours never adopt it.
Yeah.
And it is interesting, there's about 3,000 people around the world that's pasture cropping, but very few around my local area.
And very few of their neighbours are probably pasture cropping either.
Yeah.
Yeah. So have you seen, because I've heard you quote that figure for a while now, have you seen the sort of interest in pasture cropping plateau, or where do you, because has it changed much, or? It's
being adopted more. There's a big, I don't know, big, but there's a lot of adoption now in the US, mostly in the southern states, because it fits better in the southern states.
With their climate.
With their climate.
So do you think, well, just on that, do you think climatically it's easier to do this where you've got the a more of an even distribution of rainfall, or where it's better with summer rainfall? Or
even distribution is better because although there's a fair bit happening in Western Australia where it's with rainfall, providing you can, there's enough rainfall in the summer to grow a warm season grass, and then grow a crop into that when it's dormant in the winter, as long as there's enough for that.
Which is kind of interesting around the world anyway. Like Spain is a very winter dominant rainfall environment, and I've been there a lot of times, as people would know, and I've had people swear blue in the face that there's no summer grasses there, but I just say, well, I've just driven along the roads everywhere and there's summer grasses everywhere. So there seems to be that when you have enough carbon in the soil, as I put it, rain continues after, because you've got the water stored in the carbon in the soil. That's when you start to get the warm season grasses in winter rainfall environments come along.
That's right. And some work I've done around Winona in Victoria, some of the fellows there now are starting to get more warm season natives back, like curly windmill grass and those types of grasses that are returning to some of those places.
Yeah, and so when they come along, then that's when you really know you're hitting your straps.
That's right.
Yeah.
And really about managing dry seasons, certainly there's a lot in how we manage our stock, but a lot of it is related to having species diversity and perennial species diversity. many places now are just dominated by annuals.
Yeah.
No one in the world will ever manage a drought with annuals.
So, well, that's probably a good point for now. Are you saying that from year to year in the same paddock that you'll have different species will come to dominate because of that diversity
That's
in
exactly
response
right.
to the climate change?
Absolutely correct. Yeah, same paddock. You'll get a dominance. A particular plant will express itself in a different year, and you'd swear it was one year it'll be dominated by something like warrego summergrass, and the next year it'll be dominated by redgrass, or the next year it'll be dominated by cotton paddock. They're all there, but just rainfall, I think, at different times, so they just express themselves differently.
Yeah. So on the climate change thing, it's a fairly controversial thing here in Australia and elsewhere, and with primary producers, it's a really polarizing discussion. Yeah. How do you address that when you're dealing with producers around Australia as you do?
Yeah.
How do you look at it? What's your attitude to it all?
I've actually looked at our rainfall records here, and especially the last 20 years. And even though our average hasn't shifted much, but our distribution has shifted enormously. And we're definitely getting bigger events and more events in the summer, rainfall events, and less in the winter. And there's definitely a pattern in that.
Yeah.
Some
people would say, as we've heard, they'd say, that's just part of the cycle, Cole. I mean, Australia is variable.
Yeah. And it is variable. Okay, even if nothing is happening, we've got to get these agricultural practices right. And this country's been dry and variable probably for the last 30 million years.
Yeah.
So which means that we really need more perennials in here. Like the best things to handle, especially droughts and variable seasons, are what Mother Nature threw out here in the first place, and that's more native species.
So that's talking to you yesterday with your upcoming book and whatnot. You're looking at the context as a couple of Europeans here in this brown land, and us coming here with all of our ideas, and Charlie Massey in his great book, The Reed Warbler, called The Reed Warbler, spoke to that as well.
Yeah.
About us. I mean, it's been people have been talking about, that we brought our European ideas here and away we go. So are you still going through what that means to be a European in this place?
Yep. No, it's interesting. It was at least 30 years ago. I started, after the bushfire here in 1979, I was trying to work out how we could do this, how I could run this place basically without any money. And I started...
Because you had none.
Because I had none.
Yeah.
Yeah, no trouble. Yeah. And I was looking at a different form of agriculture then. And I had it going around in my head. And what I was looking at was a combination of European land management, Aboriginal land management, and a method that encompassed a farm ecosystem, which was almost like a permaculture type thing. I couldn't get my head around it. Yeah. And over time, that's what's morphed out of what I'm doing with pasture cropping and then incorporating some of Alan Savory's grazing management. It has gone that way.
Oh, that's interesting. So is this before pasture cropping sort of come along?
Yeah, a long time before.
Yeah, right. So this is in the late 70s, early 80s.
In through the 80s when I was trying to address these things.
So, from that perspective, because history is interesting, and I know with your book that's a really big part of what you're going on about. In terms of your influences around that time, I mean, you've got Savory. You've got what's framing your influences? Who are the people that you're talking to? Christine Jones and all those sort of characters.
Yeah, Christine has had more influence on what I've done here than anyone.
Yeah.
What Christine and I are pretty good friends, and what when I was developing and Darren Clough and I were developing the early days of pasture cropping. Chris could understand she immediately understood what we were doing to start with, Very, very few people did, and you know, a lot of criticism about what we're doing. But Chris,
I suppose the results were probably a little bit sketchy to start with too. Though.
Yes, they were. The yields were lower, and that when we first started. But Chris could understand what we're doing from a plant's point of view, plant and soil, and she knew what was going on in the soil, and this was in the early 90s. So that was a great benefit, and someone that was of support.
Yeah.
I could bring Chris up and.
Yeah, well, she's such a clear talker and all the rest of it, which is helpful. But otherwise, were there other influences that you were looking at, or was it
not really?
Yeah.
No. Well, Alan certainly, but the original thing with the grazing management, I couldn't understand. This is real early 90s, and I reckon that form of grazing management got even bullshit. It won't work.
What's that? The holistic sort of plan grazing.
This is what I thought.
Yeah.
Right, but. What I did was try it. I said, I'll prove this wrong.
Yeah.
I'll prove Alan Savory wrong. Yeah, yep.
Good luck with that.
So I put
don't know Alan too well if you're trying to do that.
I do know Alan fairly well, but I didn't then.
No, that's what I mean.
So I put a mob of 1,000 ewes together and started to rotate them around. And within a couple of months, I said, and I had no idea what I was doing. Within a couple of months, I said, "Gee, yeah, this will work."
Yeah.
And then I adopted it and then a bit more knowledge as well.
Yeah, well, it's a really interesting thing. All of these emergence of ideas, and you know what you and Darren were able to come up with, which is. I suppose it would have. Do you think that in the emergence of pasture cropping that there would have been other characters at different times that might have gone and sown stuff into existing grasslands and stuff? Did you see any of that, or people come out of the woodwork and said, "Oh, I did that years ago"? Or
the main one that's also is Bruce Maynard.
Yep.
And Bruce is out sort of near Trangie or a couple of hours west of here, and Bruce was doing something very similar. Our philosophies were a bit different. I always thought that if I was going to get this to work, I needed to be able to produce crops pretty close to yielding as a conventional crop. But Bruce was mostly doing it, he's just a fully organic system, and he's drilling crops dry with a disc planter early in the season before anything grows.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Well, they've got sort of like the 5 rules: disc planting, no kills. It's called no kill cropping. So no fertilizer, no herbicide, good grazing management. I can't remember the other one, but
and it works well within that. But so the main difference was where we were coming from. Like Bruce was wanting to add to and I guess add feed more.
Yeah,
but not as big an opportunity to get grain from that.
So your focus with the cropping part of it is that you're trying to achieve a yield out of the crop.
Yeah.
Whereas Bruce's system is, well, if you get a crop out of it, well, that's great. The worst case scenario is you might get a bit more feed.
That's right. Yeah. What I didn't realise at the time when we were developing pasture cropping was all of the ecological benefits that would come from it. We saw it initially as a low cost, easy way of growing some crops and generating stock feed, but the ecological benefits were huge, and no way we could have known, or anyone could have known, what was going to come from that.
So, when you started testing pretty early, was that part of the relationship with Chris, or how did that all? Because you do have a fair bit of body of research on what you've done, which is pretty impressive.
Some of that was due to Chris, but mostly early days was observation with myself and Darren Clark, and we could see after a crop was sown that we were getting young seedlings of native grasses coming up in the drill rows, and we wondered what was going on, and then we saw it every time, and now that's been shown.
Well, the conventional person would think, I've got to spray that.
You've got to kill that.
Yeah.
But these perennial grasses were coming up. So we stumbled across a very low cost and probably the fastest way to restore grasslands. Totally accidental. And
has Bruce got the similar sort of outcome with his setup?
Yeah, similar. Bruce never ever reported as much as that as we did. I don't know what the difference. Maybe it was just
less samples.
Maybe I don't know. But he would have certainly got some recruitment. And a lot of it now we think we know. There's been no research done on that why, but Christine Jones and I have tossed it around what's happening. Oats in particular is very strongly mycorrhizal. So what we were doing was kickstarting and almost turbocharging the rhizosphere around the oat plant, and created a very healthy environment for seeds that were already in the soil to germinate. Mm-hmm. In other words, it was too hostile for them to germinate before that. Yeah. And we weren't using, we were using very low rates of fertilizer and very low rates at that time of pesticides or herbicide.
Yeah. And you showed me some crops this morning where you used no herbicide at all. Yeah. And you got a regionally average crop.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
While you've got this bulk coming up underneath as well.
Yeah.
So with the the method of Bruce's, have you gone out and had a bit of a look at that over time? Yeah. So your mates,
Bruce and I did a lot of workshops together, like pasture cropping, no-kill cropping workshops.
Because they happen, you were like it was a separate development.
Totally separate development. At around the same time, I think Bruce was only a year or two after Darren and I started here.
Yeah. So with the research that you've had done by universities and whatnot, what's that mostly been about?
Yeah.
And how far back does that go?
CSIRO did some work here 2005 or 6.
So you're about 10 years in, because when did you start? It was about 93,
about 93, somewhere around there. And they were looking at water use efficiency, nitrogen use, that sort of stuff. But now we've done, Sydney Uni's done quite a lot, and we were looking at quite a few different things Sydney Uni did. One was insect counts, which were very positive.
Horrifyingly high, I would say.
The insects increased by 600% and diversity by 125%. And consequently, which seems counterintuitive, that we don't get insect attacking crops anymore.
No.
That's because a lot of the increase of spiders and that type of...
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. So, and with your soil depth, how much deeper is your soil? And this is I would say, this is a fairly marginal site. It's not certainly not the best country in the world. These granites are pretty marginal. They're a bit erosive. Yeah. All the bases are quite low.
That's right. Yeah.
When it normally has to be sort of like class 4 land, a lot of it, wouldn't it?
My grandfather came here in 1868.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why he didn't pick their country.
You wished he had. It's a nice spot. It's got a beautiful view. Anyway.
It's interesting now. We've done quite a lot of measurements, and this is where Christine Jones was involved. We dug quite a lot of soil profiles.
Yeah.
And the soil now is, the soil is building to about 2 feet, 60 centimetres.
Right.
And you can see it down the profile. It's actually
which, if you went to the Wimmera, they'd say, that's not that crash. A lot of our plants get down deeper than that, but they had a better start in the first place.
That's right. Yeah. I remember this when I was a teenager and we were ploughing country. Yeah. Like I was ploughing paddocks for my father, and the soil was the topsoil was about 4 inches.
Yeah.
It's definitely increased a lot.
Yeah.
And we've done.
Well, this is classic mixed grazing country, isn't it? From that perspective.
Right. Yeah. Well, this place was farmed, as in my father grew wheat on a lot from the 1930s.
Yeah.
So it's had a bit of a hammering over from that time on.
So in terms of carbon levels and all of that sort of thing, where did you start and where are you at now?
They've increased by about 200%.
Yeah. And through the profile.
and through the profile.
Yeah.
And we've got detailed measurements on that. Some now are testing in the top 10.
Yeah.
They're testing. They've gone from about 1.2 to 2.5, and we're pushing 3%.
Yeah.
Percent.
So you started off at 1.5, which is a desert.
1.2.
Yeah, that's nothing.
Yeah. So they've increased a lot, but interestingly, where the big increases are
Still not a lot, though, is it? You know,
not really.
No.
But they've increased to depth. Like they've increased to at least half a metre, if we measure them there, and the percentage increase at 50 to 60 centimetres is a 300% increase.
Yeah, right.
And what's driving that are these perennial plant roots going right down there.
Yeah, putting their liquid in there.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. So if you got your 4 inches of soil, which has got, if you got that to 2.5%, a lot of people will be going yippee, but not many people are getting it down to that depth.
No, and you won't with annual plants. You need perennials to do that.
Yeah, and every time you go and work the ground up, well, you lose it anyway.
Come back again.
So you let us know yesterday when we dropped in that you've got a book coming up.
Yeah.
What's the sort of snapshot on that?
Okay. Yeah. What I did was I wrote it on family history from here, which sounds dreadfully boring, but and really how our family changed, the damage that we did. In other words, how my family stuffed it up along the way, including myself, and then what I've done to heal it and fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And starting from my great whatever grandfather was a convict, who had a farm in Parramatta, near Parramatta in Sydney, so we were farming very early.
1798 or something.
Yeah, 1798. Yeah. Stole a shirt.
Stole a shirt. Wish you still had that shirt.
Yeah, no doubt it was taken off him.
That's right. Yeah, forget about that.
So I covered that, but also the journey that each generation has done, gone through in that time. How we started, or my great grandfather started with the grassland here, and then over time, different generations destroyed the grassland, including me on the plough when I was a teenager, and then restoring that grassland again.
Well, and having the fire in between. Was that the only big fire you had here over the journey?
Yeah, although we had one early lose track of time, last year. Last year.
Which I'll touch on.
But it wasn't a big fire. But that was the main one. But the fire was the catalyst to change.
Yes.
But in that book, I also talk about what's gone wrong in conventional agriculture, and
so you're sort of tying your own family's history with what's gone on.
That's exactly
with the
right.
human story along the same journey.
Yeah.
Which is really, I'm sure people will love reading that, because I suppose a lot of stuff that's out there is very technical and sort of here's how.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, especially rural people, like a story to be wrapped up.
I didn't want to write it that way because that type of journal is not very readable, and the more people we can get to understand about the need to change agricultural practices, the better.
Well, you would have had a lot of feedback because you've done a lot of workshops around the country, and probably quite unique in the way that you've, especially with people like Graham Handy and Christine, you've been a pretty well-known trio and duo. You've had a lot of support from CMAs and natural management, or DPIs and all that Department of Primary Industries, ag departments around, which you've got that, but at the same time, there's still a bit of resistance from who is it that's within these departments that are is it the younger ones in there, or is it the disenchanted? They're supportive. Yeah.
The Department of Agriculture has never been supportive.
Yeah.
the main support has really come through the land care movement.
Yeah.
And the people that really understand this are not people, agronomy people, but ecologists. Ecologists are the ones that really understand, and we really need more ecologists in agriculture.
Yeah.
Because really,
agroecologists, as is the term. Yeah.
Because our farms should function as ecosystems.
Yes.
That's why they crash. If they don't stop functioning as ecosystems, they fall out.
So with that in your book, is it the feedback that you've got in the way that you've got a pretty unique, well, I wouldn't say unique storytelling style, because a lot of people, when you go to, like, it's not usual to go to workshops where a farmer is actually the one giving the lecture or giving the seminar.
Yeah.
And you deliver it as a farmer, which I find really enjoyable. Yeah. And I suppose that's been part of do you think that's part of the success that you've had and why you've been repeatedly asked back?
I guess so. I don't know. I just tell it how it is.
Yeah.
But another thing too, when I could see the changes happening on the place here, I thought, no bastard's going to believe this, because the changes were dramatic. Like, we got all this grass starting to grow on the place, and which isn't supposed to happen. There was a lot of things that weren't supposed to happen. Like, to start with, you're not supposed to be able to grow a crop in living grass.
No.
And really, this is the first real change there's been in agriculture for 10,000 years.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
That's
in growing crops, I mean. So I thought, no one's going to believe this. So I started to record what was going on, and then I started pushing CSIRO and universities. I said, come and have a look at this. Well, especially when if I got criticism, which I did at those early workshops, I said, well, if you don't believe me, come and measure it.
Yeah.
And some of them took that up, which was really good. And then not only do I present at workshop what I'm doing, but show them the data on it, of what's actually going on.
So now book will do what it'll do over the next year or so, hopefully. You've got Gabe Brown. I like to talk about him because pasture cropping, I suppose, has been you've been mainly influenced by your own work and the feedback that you've got from people who've done it here in Australia.
Yeah.
You've had this meeting of the minds with yet another character in this space. You've got Bruce Maynard, you've got yourself, Darren, and other people, and now you meet with someone like Gabe.
Yeah.
That changed things a bit for you?
Yeah, from about 2009 and 10, I started experimenting it with pasture cropping again, but sowing oats and peas together. And
which is not an unusual combo anyway.
No, it's not. And I was looking at, we were getting good gains in soils, and I thought I wanted to drive this further and faster. And I thought, well, I've got all this diversity in the grassland, but I'm still growing a monoculture crop. So I was invited to speak at a conference in Kansas in 2012, and while I was over there, I had a big trip up north and up to Gabe Brown's country, Bismarck, North Dakota, and I met Gabe and David Brandt and Gail Fuller and all these
all those guys, all those people,
and they were talking about that. Dave was just started playing around a bit then with mixes of crops, and the penny dropped with me that was the key, multiple species. Yeah, more species in the crop. So I started growing more and more species. My work is different. It's almost reversed around from what Gabe is doing. Gabe's annual cover cropping multi-species, and that is a biological primer for his main crop, corn or soybean or whatever. And
with grazing integrated, but the grazing came in fairly late for him.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. So what I'm doing, like pasture cropping, is misunderstood a lot. Pasture cropping is actually perennial cover cropping.
Yes.
And the perennial grass is the cover.
Yes.
Now, what Gabe and Dave Brandt and those fellows are doing is the multi-species crop. is the cover.
Yes.
And
without the perennial base.
Where there's no perennial base,
Yeah.
it's an annual system.
Yeah.
But here, when I started mixing it, the multi-species crop was the crop, and the grass was still the cover, and that was the difference.
Yeah.
And I emailed Gabe. It's just funny. I emailed Gabe and told him what I was doing, and Gabe came back and he said, "Wow," he said, "us Americans couldn't get drunk enough to think of something like that."
Yes, well, your presentations have been started with beer bottles. Yeah, so, well, that's really interesting. And so with taking up that multi-species approach, thinking about it as a cropper again, I mean, a cropper is, you're trying to produce a commodity which goes for sale, or in some case goes for animal feed that you're doing.
Yeah.
Do you think that how this will run along is that you will do more multi-species now because you're not selling it off farm, or how does that actually work? Because, you know, if you're going to do, say, 4 or 5 species, well, you can't sell that at the local silo.
Interestingly, you can. Well, I'll go through what I'm doing. Yes, I am growing more and more multi-species crops, and it will probably so almost all of them multi-species. The great advantage in it, just from a practical point of view, is very, very high quality grazing.
Yes.
Faster growth rates, faster finishing, fattening potential. What I've been doing here, I wondered whether it was possible to harvest a multi-species grain, like a mix of crops. And I get a contractor in here who's a neighbour down the road, and he knows I'm a lunatic. And he harvested this wild looking crop.
So I'm going to screen this.
And he's got a reasonably new harvester, and he did a pretty good job on it, the mix. And so that was interesting. So you can harvest a mixed crop, but what I do now is use sheep in grazing. I graze it 3 or 4 times through the year, with sheep.
And do it in crop as well. Early.
Yeah, they do it reasonably early. But what the sheep do, or cattle do the same thing, is that they'll take out, they'll graze like the turnips and radish and all those brassicas and peas and that. They won't recover as well. They'll only tolerate 2 grazings. They won't recover as well as oats will.
Yeah.
Oats, you can eat it into the ground and it'll recover.
Yeah.
So you can remove those species with animals and still harvest a pure oat stand.
Yeah, right. Okay. So there's all of that, which is all margin that
That's
you're
right.
getting. So,
Well,
I was just curious in terms of, you're harvesting and the harvesters can handle it, but you know, you got to take that down to the silo. How are they going to handle it? You know, if you were listening to this and you were going, "Gee, this guy's, how am I going to deal with this? I'm a commodity producer. I'm going to stick with just one crop, aren't I?"
That's right. Yeah. Well, there's ways around it. I mean, you can
screen it, which is going to cost.
which is you're going to cost. And there'd be, I mean, from a stock feed point of view, wonderful stock feed if you do it as a mix.
Yeah. So, but I suppose you're still more of a livestock person than a cropping person. And that's, I suppose that's where I'm coming from.
And you're spot on it. And that's why I find this a lot easier, and I found it easier to develop this because, I'm a grazier that grows crops.
Yes.
I'm not a cropper that runs livestock.
Yes.
So my focus is always on the sheep.
Well, let's just touch on that a bit, because one of the things that we talked about yesterday is that we do have a phenomena here in Australia, which is pretty recent because we're well known as being a mixed farming nation for various reasons. That's changed in probably the last 20 years or so. Mm-hmm. What do you think the ramifications of that are, that you see now and that you will see in the future?
We should never...
Of us shifting, of people getting rid of animals.
We should never have taken animals out of cropping programs.
Yeah.
And a lot of the problems associated with cropping now, and a lot of it's finance and risk, we'll just look at that for a bit. It's a lot riskier. With mixed farming, you've got two goes at it. The other thing too that the croppers were told and they believe that animals are detrimental to soils and crops and that cause compaction. My answer to that is that it's not the animals that cause the compaction, it's lack of ground cover and lack of plant root mass that causes the compaction. So I think...
And in your case, with your system, living or dormant, permanent, perennial root systems...
never get compaction with
which system. Most people would never know because, like, again, no one sows crops into perennials.
That's right. So, but even without pasture cropping, the animals are doing a wonderful service in that they're cycling nutrients well. They're keeping the soils a lot healthier, and the soil ecosystem is functioning better with animals on it.
Yeah.
But they seem to have forgotten all about that. And interestingly, a lot of not a lot, but a fair percentage of American farmers are going back into mixed farming and animals. And
because they've been animalists for a lot longer than we have. Pre-50s everyone was. Now it's they probably had 40 or 50 years of it.
That's right. But our croppers here are a lot slower to turn around.
Well, a bit. So, are you seeing that? Are you seeing any trends of turning that around, or do you think it's that we're still getting a decline in the number of people who are producing livestock?
No, there are a few of the croppers starting to head back that way, but certainly not in big numbers. And a lot of it's because they've got no infrastructure left to run animals anymore.
Or if you're running sheep, for that matter, which is what this country's been built on. I mean, even just the quantity of shearers and...
That's right. If
there's no sheep, there's no shearers. So it's an interesting dilemma, and it'll be. I often say there's no such thing as a vegetarian ecology. So there shouldn't be. For a farm to function as an ecology, as you put it before, as an agroecology, animals cannot be excluded from that.
Absolutely.
So what's the future for Winona and Colin Seis and you? What do you see for other people out there? You're pretty buoyant about it, or how do you feel?
For the future of agriculture?
Yeah.
I think agriculture's got a wonderful future.
Yeah.
And just look at it on the big picture side of it, with growing populations, world populations, agriculture has got to have a good future, providing we can stop multinational companies from ripping us off and trying to get us to use things that we don't need or want. We need agriculture needs to change, and I actually see agriculture taking two directions. Like the high input, high chemical form of agriculture will continue, but now we've got a form of agriculture which is starting to be called regenerative agriculture, but it encompasses organic and
low input
agriculture and low input. So there's a lot of good stuff happening on that front, and I think agriculture will definitely go that way. There'll be more and more adoption of that form of agriculture.
Yeah. So you're pretty satisfied, and I suppose you've also seen that there's no consequential loss of yield. In fact, there's a maintenance of yield and an increased profitability from a lot of this as well.
Definitely more profitable. If you look at the overall production of a farm, it's actually more. There's more production of a farm with this form of agriculture than more conventional agriculture.
Okay. So I've just got a question here from somebody, it seems. Someone's looking to contact Mr. Seis. I'm sure your inbox is a disaster as far as too many per day. How do you manage all of that as far as the future is concerned? I noticed you've got a whole office here with a team of people.
Me.
Yeah, that's right. And 3,000 sheep. So how do you manage all of that?
I do less work on the farm now, and I find myself doing a lot more workshops and that. And my son Nick is doing more of the practical side of it.
Yeah.
I make sure I'm around when the busy type things are on.
Yeah.
So I that's freed me up to do
Yeah,
more.
and you do consulting work.
I do a lot of consulting
So people like this gentleman here from Serbia could certainly contact you and have you consult to him professionally about how to do pasture cropping in Serbia, perhaps. But that's What? Yeah, sorry. What am I reading the question? Pardon me. Just to leave it with me for a minute. Hang on, it won't work. Where did it go? Photos. Pardon me. So, hey, is there an email or some other way for contacting Mr. Seis or anyone who could explain a little bit more about about the planter used for pasture cropping? I'm from Serbia and really want to make a 1 to 2 row planter so quite a small one to try pasture cropping. I suppose it doesn't really matter, does it? What size?
No, it could be drawn with a horse if you like.
Yeah.
In fact, some people are doing that.
So, do you have a preference over one or over the other?
As in whether it's a dish planter
or a tine.
Or a tine. I've used a tine here, and I started using a tine because when I first started here, and we started basically direct drilling, the soils were that hard here that we needed a bit more soil disturbance to get a better result. So, as good as disc planters are, we need to be really careful if your soil is poor structured.
Yeah.
And most of our soils, unfortunately, are poor structured.
Could you go to disc now that your soils are?
I could now.
Yeah. But then that investment may undermine things.
That's right. But also, I think part of the reason we're getting good recruitment of native grasses from seed germinating is because of that little bit of extra disturbance. Now, the disturbance is only minor. It's only a 12 mil wide knife point, so it's very minor at 12-inch spacing. So.
Yeah, well, and if you go into a functional system, there's little, and I'm sure it would have been, back in the day, there would have been little marsupials running around all through there and all sorts of things doing disturbance.
Absolutely.
Caching seeds and, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So, there you go. Anyway, so it's going to be, basically the equipment that you use for no-till, that works for your particular environment.
Right. It hasn't got to be anything complicated. any no-till planting drill is fine.
Yeah, great. All right, well, anything else you wanted to bring up, Cole? I think we've gone around the world and back again. Well, it's been an honour to be in your home and in your place again. It's good. The last time I was here, the crops were a little bit higher than what they were this morning. Yeah. But it was great. Really good to be here and have a yarn. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, darling.